How's your sex life? How's your wieners, your vajayjays, all the things that you use when you're having sex? And the reason I ask is because no one else does. And that's why you're here listening to the Sex 101 podcast. It's hard to communicate your sexual desires, your needs, your wants. So we're here for you and your partner. This show is dedicated to improving sexual communication and removing the taboos about sex and sexual intimacy. Dr. Stormy has a wealth of experience, knowledge, and helpful advice that will take your lovemaking to the next level. And I'm here to make you laugh and show you that even rock stars don't know enough about sex. So put on your headphones if you're at work and let us make sex better for you. All right, we're back for another episode of Sex 101. This is the sex education you wish you had. And that is very true for me too. My sex education really was. So I can remember it was always a coach. You know what I mean? And I'm old. So the coaches that I had were those like kind of spandexy shorts, you know what I'm talking about? And still had the whistle around their neck and like, look, almost looked like a 70s porn star. And when you laughed when he said something about vagina or your penis getting erect or something, he just couldn't handle it. It was, it just was not good. It was, and then of course, growing up in the church, we just didn't even talk about it. So my sex education was really bad, bad.
Yeah. And I think it's gotten worse. Like, I mean, I grew up in Colorado. Well, at this time when I was doing my sex ed was in Colorado. And, we put condom on a banana. We split up boys and girls. And my son was in Utah when he got his, let's just call it sex ed, but I'm going to go with total lack of sex education. And they like literally talked about nothing, did nothing. I mean, it was because it's so, abstinence only based. And I'm like, when in the history of the world has repression ever worked? Yet with sex, we keep trying it as a strategy. It's so crazy.
I know. We have, I think everybody has been taught to have some hangups about sex as opposed to feeling more free and open and questioning. And, it just doesn't happen. I just never taught my mom bought a cartoon video and never even showed it to us. We found it in her closet or her drawer, when we were out for summer and she was at work. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what is this? And and even that just showed like under the cover said, this is what happened, but she never talked to us about it. And you're just supposed to, find out. So it's kind of nice now in this time that we live in where you can ask more questions to definitely make it a lot more open and safe and fun, which leads me to the topic that I want to talk about today. I had some people write me about, some marriage supply toys and a little bit. And what several people asked me was, could we have more like BDSM toys, bondage? What is it? BDSM stands for what? Bondage and
discipline, dominance and submission, and sadism and masochism.
Okay. So all that stuff. And I was like, and so my, upbringing, my childhood, my lack of sex education, still even now is like, it's interesting when you think about you love somebody, you want to make love to them, but also you might want to spank them or tie them up or even choke them. Yeah, so that one is a hard one. Like, and I was thinking about our listeners, you might want to have that conversation and of course, consent and safety here. This is, but I did want us to talk about that a little bit because I don't even know, like, how do you even bring something like that up? If you're having, with your partner, you're having good sex or you want to try something new, you're like, hey, I'd love to spank your bottom. That's just the intro, maybe. I don't even know if spanking your bottom's that bad. I don't know if that's rough.
Oh, that's amazing. So I think really, right. So we're talking about rough sex, right? Like, and I say rough sex in quotes because what is rough for someone or a couple would not be at all considered rough for other couples, right? So to your point, and we'll go through it. Like, I think it's a great topic. I think it's a topic that, we know it's one of the most common sexual fantasies is rough sex, like in Americans.
Really? I did not know that.
Yeah. So statistically, it's one of the most common popular fantasies. And then I found a study that was, I don't know why it was Midwesterners, but the study was 2019 study was 5,000 Midwesterners. And 79% have tried, these are people in coupleship, have tried what they call rough sex. But 46% of them really enjoyed it somewhat. And 39% of that 79% really enjoyed it. So, just to normalize that it's a very common fantasy. It's a common practice. And so let's dive into like, what does that mean? Like you said, what does it even mean? Right. And how to bring it in to your relationship if you desire to and your partner desires to, and then how to make it safe and consensual.
Yeah, 100%. I will be a little honest here. I tried it one time, and my partner was like, "What if we tried to choke me?" And I was so nervous and embarrassed. It was basically just like to her, it felt like she was just wearing a turtleneck. It did not at all feel like I was doing anything rough, and I was like, I can't go harder than this. I'm not gonna be able to do this. Yeah. So
I love that story. I love that sharing because it brings up the fact that it may be a boundary, like it may be an edge for like either person, the person wanting to receive the rough play, the person giving the rough play. Like to your point, I think it's really common for partners to say, "I'm scared to hurt you," or "I don't find that sexy." Right. So, I mean, we're going to start with what we always start with, that communication is the key here.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
And so like, I think let's just get right into like, what is rough sex or rough play, I like to call it, mean, because it might not be penetrative sex, right? And actually that's one that I would say to start. If you're starting, don't start with rough sex, start with rough play, start with rough foreplay. I think there is not one definition of what makes rough sex, just like there's not one definition of what makes kink. But often it's included kind of in the kinky play sort of genre. And it means aggressive behaviors are incorporated. So again, one person's rough might be one person's vanilla, So the communication is key, but let's just talk a little bit about the definition. So to me, how I like to think of it is that you might be talking about impact play. So that would be your spanking, your slapping, right? So impact to your partner.
Okay.
You might be talking about bondage or restriction. So tying your partner up or down, you might be talking about consensual pain, and that is a continuum, right? So again, one person's pain might be another person's pleasure. So, so consensual pain, choking, so air restriction, like you were talking about, and things like that are more. We'll get into that when I get into like how to start doing that. But things like that are more benign, like hair pulling, those would all be considered in the rough play. Also, just having sex more roughly, like thrusting more roughly, grabbing, each other more roughly. That would be also considered in this genre.
Yeah. It's funny that spectrum there. You're right. Like I don't ever even think about it. Like the word rough or rough play really does cover a lot of ground there. And I think that's why sometimes it's intimidating too, because you don't know, like you said, where to start and what to do. So this is all really good.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the world in the BDSM world, and rough play does not have to be part of BDSM. If BDSM feels like I'm a little too scared about BDSM, although I think we should totally do an episode on kink, I call it conscious kink. But I think if it's BDSM, always has a dynamic, a power dynamic, right? So a dominant and a submissive, or a switch of those roles. But you can bring in rough play into without fully going into BDSM or kink. Mm-hmm. So, I think I saw a study, that 2019 study, that talked about rough sex and why you might want to consider bringing that into your partnership. And it was curiosity, novelty, and intensity. So it is a very effective way to bring in curiosity, novelty, and intensity. So I think, and also to normalize it. It doesn't have to be, you can start small and always safe and always consensual. You can start small and and I think it can be like, I don't have any idea what to do. I'm thinking full on Red Dungeon, 50 Shades of Grey, and that seems a little intimidating to me. So I'm not going to go into the foray of rough sex at all. But maybe you're missing out this whole world that's, let's just call it more tepidly rough, that could be really sexy for you and your partner to explore.
Yeah. So when I'm sure you're about to get into this, but like, is there an entry point, or like, is there
no pun intended?
No pun intended. Yeah. But yeah, is there like so when you're thinking about this, I think that the people that sent in some questions and were asking about some products for Marriage Supply, I think they're just thinking, I just want to, just like you said, I really like that you said intensity, because intensity is also a spectrum. know what I mean? A little bit of intensity is nice,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe a little bit more for somebody, depending on what you want or what you are enjoying or want to have or want to experience. But yeah, is there like an entry point there with rough play?
Yeah, I think totally. Yeah, I think one thing that's good to think about from a psychological perspective before we get into like tangibles and logistics is, most of us think of pain. If you think of a line, we think of pain on one end of the line, and we think of bliss, or let's say even orgasm or pleasure on the other end of the line, right? And they're linear, they're opposed. But for many of us, actually psychologically, and definitely if you're in going down into the world of BDSM and impact play is something that turns you on, it's more like a circle. So you'd have pain and pleasure right next to each other, like in a continuum, right?
Yeah.
And even like, let's say like even in childbirth, there are people, I forget the percentage. I want to say it's like 6% of women, but I don't quote me on that. But there are women who have orgasms while vaginally delivering children. I mean, and
Wow.
I was not one of those women. I feel very like I wish I had been, but but it's so intensely painful that it can actually turn into pleasure, right? And that's an extreme example, but just where pain and pleasure, I believe, are actually not opposed necessarily.
Yeah.
Right. And so this might be so just to maybe start to think, is that something that's interesting to you, for you out there listening? Like, is that interesting, the line between pain and pleasure? Do you think that you're curious about exploring that space? And rough play should be a really safe, beautiful place to explore that. It may be for you, it may turn you on, it may not, it may turn your partner on, it may not. So again, the communication is key in partnership, to have this conversation with your partner. Like, is it even of interest to them? And one thing I'll say before we get into some tangibles is that there's a bunch of them out there. I created one myself called Wants, Wills, Won'ts list. So it's a wants, wills, won'ts list.
Mm-hmm.
It is a super cool tool that I recommend for my clients. You guys, all of our listeners out there, can email me, Stormy at lovedeeplab.com. That's LOVEDEEPLAB as in boy, lovedeeplab.com. And I will email you the Wants, Wills, Won'ts list. It's a super cool tool to do on a date night. You don't do it in the moment. You don't do it in the sexy time, but it's basically what is sexually, and it's a very, very, very long list, of which a lot of it is kink and impact and what we would consider rough play. But what's interesting to you? So, you might have, that might be a will. What is something you really want to try, which would be a want? And what is something that you're like, oh, hell no, and that would be a won't. And you fill it out on your own, your partner fills it out, and then it gives you something to dialogue about. And it's just a super fun thing too to do. Like with my partner, when we did it on an airplane. I don't recommend doing that because the people next to me were like, could not stop looking at the list. But don't do it on an airplane. But and then you have a dialogue about it. Like, and so you're so you're looking at what are your wants and what are your partner's wants? Where do those line up? And then you're looking at it's also great conversation. Maybe it's a won't for you and a want for your partner. And that's a great conversation too. So anyway, that's a good tool more from a psychological aspect to get you curious about what are you interested in exploring. And it's also okay if you're not interested in exploring any of this.
Yeah, totally. And I wanted to, one other thing too. I think sometimes people think you're fucked up or messed up or something's wrong with you if you want that. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's a connotation that goes along with it of like, oh, well, if you like this, then there's something wrong with you mentally, or you're not in a good headspace. That's just not true, right?
Not true at all. Like, right. So long as your fantasies and the acting out in real life of your fantasies is with a consenting partner, and that you're creating safety, it is, and you're not harming the other person, right? In rough play, right? Like, you might consider that harm, but they might want you to leave a mark, right? That's something that would be up for negotiation, up for dialogue, not negotiation, up for dialogue and boundary work. But to your point, Toby, no, you're there. If you are out there and sounds interesting to you, that first of all, it's very, very normal, very common, and there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing broken. It is a very common sexual fantasy. And I think it's also like, it's taught to us too, right? Power has a dynamic. Mm-hmm. Power has a sexiness to it. you might be really intrigued with being the dominant, the one in power. And then the submissive also has a ton of power, just in a very different way, which is,
Right.
more of the on the kink side of things. But I think, one thing I would say about safety is having a conversation. If you're curious about this, maybe use a wants, wills, won'ts list or something as a tool, but having a conversation with your partner, not during sexy time, but maybe during a time of connection of, is this something they're interested in? If so, what are they starting having the conversation? If not, why not? And being really curious. Maybe they have a trauma past that is an absolute hard no for them, but maybe the hard no is like choking, but they're open to spanking. I mean, right? You don't know until you have these conversations. So looking at trigger exploration, it's just trauma informed, right? We'd never want to re-traumatize or traumatize our partner. We love our partner. We don't want to do that. So having that conversation, exploring with them. And then the other thing for safety, there's 3 things I recommend. So that is having a conversation about triggers. 2 is safe words. So if you're going to explore in the realm of rough play, safe words are a great idea. And I would say keep it simple. Like I've worked with people that are like, can't remember their safe word. Well, then it's not a safe word. Okay?
Yeah.
So go with simple.
Don't forget I forgot.
Don't forget your safe word.
That'd be me.
Yeah. So I mean, I could just tell you personally, at one point, I don't know why I hate tiramisu. So my red safe word at one point in my life was tiramisu, but I'd be like, wait, what the fuck is my safe word? Like, so that's not a safe word. Like, pick something simple, right? So you can even go with green, yellow, red, right? Super easy. Red is a hard stop, means stop now.
Yep.
Okay. Yellow might mean don't go any harder, but you can keep going at the intensity you're going. And green means I'm really enjoying it. You can go a little harder. Okay. So whatever your safe words are, but figure them out before the play starts.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the third thing that's really important for safety and a key to safety is what we call aftercare. That's exactly what it sounds like. What's going to happen? The 2 of you decide together, knowing that this can always change, but you at least have a scaffolding after the play. So maybe it's that you're going to cuddle, or maybe either you're going to take a bath together, or maybe you're going to shower together. Maybe that person's needing a little time apart, right? Whatever it is for the 2 of you, you have an agreement about what aftercare looks like. And it's really, really important. And part of aftercare, I suggest, is how was that for you? What did you like? What did you not like, right? You're having conversations about the experience. And those are 3 things that are really important to creating a safe space to play in rough play.
Yeah, that is great information. Those are all things I didn't even think about. I mean, I've heard about safe words and stuff before, but I've never really used them or anything. I never even got anywhere near that. I'm pretty vanilla, and so that is a very good reminder, because I think sometimes people just don't think about. You're right. Like, if you're going to do this, I think just having that foundation of safety and communication, and that just makes everybody feel more relaxed and then can enjoy it and go, oh, I did like that, or hey, no, I didn't. Red banana, or whatever you're going to. I don't know. That's what happened to me. I'd think the wrong color, and I'd probably say the thing that makes it go harder. No.
Right, and I don't recommend stop or yes or no, because actually you might be playing with that. So the safe words are usually like colors. You can do whatever you guys come up with, but you greet them and then you practice them, right? And at least if you at least have your red safe word, which means stop now, right? Because that's about creating safety. And if you don't feel safe, you're not going to feel pleasure. It's just, particularly for the female brain, but also for the male brain, safety is really a key to pleasure. So, I think if you want to explore rough play, first of all, we just talked about, have the conversation, do your safety measures, but then start slow and basic. You do not have to go full on 50 Shades of Grey play dungeon, you can start really slow and basic. Consent is key, which you're going to have already done in your safety. And I think another tip that I have for people is start on yourself. So let's say you're interested in, let's just use spanking as an example, a very, very, very common one, probably one of the most common ones for entry point to rough play. There are good ways to spank and there are bad ways to spank. We could do a whole podcast on how to give a good spanking, but safe ways. But how, you're going to ask for feedback a lot with your partner. You're not going to go for like a, full on spank. You're going to go with like a little love pat at first. Where do you love pat? Like, so practicing on yourself can be a really great way. How, like, let's say you're interested in biting, like nibble on your own arm or on your own wrist and see how hard or not hard feels good to you. So starting on yourself is a really great way. And then, like we mentioned in the beginning, you can start with just kissing really hard. Like, kiss hard. If you had this conversation with your partner and they're excited to explore, try kissing really hard, harder than you normally do. Try thrusting harder than you normally do. Try being up against a wall, right? So that allows for more thrusting. You can get creative with positions and with how hard you're holding on to your partner. Let's say even on their breasts, maybe they want more pressure on their breasts. Like, so you can start to play around with that, kissing hard, pressing hard, squeezing hard. And then the other thing, and I should have actually said this in the safety thing, is please, 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 if you're just exploring rough play, do so sober. Do so that you're of clear mind and body. So sober is another way to really work on creating safety, particularly if you're new to exploring this.
Yeah. Man, I feel like I'm very much noob to all this. I'm learning a lot today. Like, I'm learning a lot. Because I'm learning a lot. You're right. One of the things you touched on that I find really interesting is with my girlfriend right now. We both really passionately kiss. Like, we just both really enjoy it. And so sometimes we're kissing really hard. And I guess it's still called Frenching. Is that what everybody calls it? French kissing? Is that what it's?
If you're using your tongue, yeah.
Yeah, that's what it's called, right? That's
mm-hmm.
That's the medical term, right?
Yeah, exactly.
French kissing. But it's interesting because, like, her and I kiss sometimes, not all the times, but sometimes really passionately, and it's strong, and I really enjoy it. And
amazing.
And so does she too. So that's the thing. We both, once again, communication, consent, all of those things. Can't reiterate that enough. But I've been learning that too, which is really nice. Like something that I just hadn't really done. I'm 47. I haven't French kissed that much in a while. And so it's kind of new and nice. Yeah.
And a great kiss, and it's funny, like, I tend to be like, I like a lighter kiss normally, but there are times where a really deep, hard kiss is such a turn on, right? So you get to play, like, and I guess that was kind of my suggestion there, is like, even something we do all the time, well, often, is kissing, can get into rough play by kissing hard, right? Yeah. And maybe that's a no for your partner, and that's okay too. Like, it is an amazing tool for increase. I mean, I know we belabor communication because you literally can't have a podcast on sex and not talk about communication on every episode. Right. But it is such a great communication avenue about, and then also really being tender, like, in the world, because of my mental health background, right? So trauma, particularly if it's sexual or physical trauma, they might have some very strong no's, and that is beautiful to know and understand. It creates intimacy and sacredness with your partner to know where their no's are. And I always say we really have to be able to communicate our no's, because it makes us trust our yeses so much more.
Oh, that's such a good point. All right, what else can you do in the rough world?
Well, I mean, there's, we could go on and on and on. So, I mean, I think if you're interested in air restriction, breath restriction, so choking and other forms of air restriction, safety is really key, because obviously we're talking about air. So, that wouldn't be a beginner point. That would not be something I would recommend to start with beginner play, or at least if you're going to, make sure you have your safe words and you have safety precautions. So, but, I think it's like there's even let's just say something simple like hair pulling. How hard, right? So pulling hair down is way less intense than pulling hair up, right? So just even some simple things like that. And how you're going to figure that out is by playing around with it and giving lots of feedback to each other.
Yeah, I had a partner tell me they like their hair pulled, but in a way that was more like not necessarily pulling it, but in control of the hair in a way, you know what I mean? So I thought that was interesting. Like, it was a different form, that it wasn't like they wanted pain or like an actual pulling or anything of their hair on their head, but more just like, oh, it's in control. It's like there's a hand there and it's guiding away or something like that. And I thought that was
Totally.
kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
gonna
So I think it's, don't be afraid to try it. You're totally normal if you're curious about it. Having the conversations with your partner is key. And then, like we said, the safety and consent piece, and then just starting small and simple, right? And maybe if it's something that like the two of you are really enjoying, well, then you can explore more and more, right? And then again, the piece we always say, and you're so great at this, Toby, is like being willing to like laugh, right? Even though you're exploring rough, it doesn't have to be so serious. It can be like, oh, nope, no, that's a definite no for me next time. It's like, great. Now you learned a definite no for yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where like the aftercare, like, what did you like? What did you not like? What, maybe what made you, what brought you most pleasure? What made you laugh? Like, these are all really good questions to have as part of your aftercare.
And I mean, I just will ask the question: air restriction just makes you orgasm better, or like what is it like? Makes you lightheaded, so you feel more? Like, what's the draw
Oh
there?
yeah, good. Yeah, good question. So I mean, there's psychological draws as well as physiological draws with air restriction, and it's so funny, right? So I was before we started recording, I was sharing with you like from the kink world, they'll say, "Don't yuck my yum," right? So meaning someone might find it very erotic, very sexy, very uh, pleasurable, and someone else might be like, "Oh hell no, that's a hard no
Right.
for me," and that's okay, right? So, but being curious, respectful, and consenting are keys to exploring this. And so, like the reason I brought that up is for me, air restriction for the most part is a no for me personally because I get claustrophobic. Like I have this like a bit of an obsession with my airway, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I can do some gentle exploration there, but it's not something because it takes me out of my pleasure because I'm so worried about my airway. So,
Right.
but for some people, no judgment at all, that is a total turn on, right? So,
Yeah. And then I guess just when you are doing that, it would be like hand placement should be careful. Like me, I got an Adam's apple. I don't want you to hurt my Adam's apple, or I don't want a partner to hurt my Adam's apple or whatever. Like I
yeah.
guess it's like maybe I'm sure there's plenty of explanation on. You could Google it or whatever. I don't know if that makes people feel uncomfortable. How do I choke somebody
You're going to get a
well?
lot of porn
Yeah,
popping up.
yeah. But
If you
I
Google
guess you're
that.
right. I guess you're right. But yeah, just be
But yeah,
careful
there's
with the
ways to
neck.
do it safely. Yeah, ways to do it safely. So, and again, start small. Like start small, right? So you mentioned that partner that wanted the choking, right? That is a form of air restriction, right? But you literally can choke without closing off an airway, like, and you actually should. That's like until you're exploring it differently. But so yeah, I mean, again, starting small and then absolutely key is safe words if you're gonna be doing any sort of air restriction.
Yeah. All right. What about? So I've been in a very embarrassing situation before where we tried spanking and it just turned. I say embarrassing. It turned into just hilarious laughter, and we stopped immediately. Like we were just not going to get there in a serious way. It just was
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of laughter.
Yep.
And
That's good.
but it threw me off because I was like, okay, I had prepared myself. I was like, I'm going to do this and let's see what happens here. I'm going to spank. We even had like a little soft paddle, not like
Yeah.
serious, like
Mm-hmm.
definitely soft.
Mm-hmm.
And it just was like we just couldn't do it. It was so funny. Just started dying laughing. And it was one of those things. Honestly, now when I think about it, I say embarrassing. It really was one of those moments where we tried something new and maybe even the humor added to the moment. You know what I mean? Like if in that moment, but you
Totally.
have to be like, I was happy that I was able to not be like offended or hurt. Sometimes you can be,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like if you're trying something new and somebody laughs at you, but that wasn't the case in this instance. And I think laughing together and including your partner on the laughter, there's just, my partner at the time was like, oh, this is just so funny. I'm just thinking of like, it just feels too goofy. This isn't turning me on or whatever, but I'm glad we tried it. And I was like, oh, okay. We moved on. So I think that's the case, but I guess it's the same way with spanking. Like you just start with your hand or you start with I mean, just whatever, right? Just the
Yeah, I would
entry.
definitely start with hand. It's a great question. So I love that you were able to laugh, right? And you were,
Yeah.
like I said, right? There's a difference between laughing with and laughing at, right? So, and it may have just been the situation. And it's so great if you can laugh, and especially if you're exploring new things, right? But definitely for spanking, I would, or for impact play, we call it, I would recommend starting with the hand because you have a lot more of a gauge of pressure and speed and intensity with your hand than you do, let's say, with like a paddle or a soft paddle, right? So there's other tools. But I have worked with people who didn't want to spank because that felt like a no, they didn't want to hurt their partner. They were more okay with using like a soft paddle, right? So an instrument, we call it, right? An instrument for that. So again, it's really individual, but so you're not going to start off again with like a wind up smack that your partner's unexpecting. That would be trauma, right? That would be not good. And maybe your partner is like, hey, I want you to spank me, but I don't want you to tell me when. Well, great. Now that's a different situation because you've gotten consent, right? Or I want you to spank me, when I'm on top, but only on my butt, right? Like really getting into the nuances of what does that look like, right? Because again, even in something simple like a spank, like I said, there's good spankings and there's bad spankings. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm having my first time out of Burning Man, which is now a strange. They spank you. They call you a Burning Man virgin, and I'm like, here I am. And anyway, I have a lot of great things to say about Burning Man, a lot of hard things to say about Burning Man, but this welcome spanking, they did ask for consent, but you kind of like felt like you had to like get in, and it was like a full fucking spanking.
My God.
Like,
did you yell? Were you like, ah?
I was, and I was like, I don't know if I'm turned on or terrified or both. And it wasn't sexual. It wasn't sexual at all. I was with my partner, but he wasn't the one doing the spanking. Right. And so it was really interesting. But
man, that is hilarious. That is too funny. And then, okay, so we've hit most of them. And then I guess there's, being tied up as well.
Yeah. So restriction. So bondage and restriction, right? We said it could be air restriction or not. So bondage, one thing I think is super cool. If you haven't heard of it, it's called shibari, and it's the art of exotic bondage. Super, super cool. But again, safety. It is not like beginner rope play. It is, but they make it very easy, right? Like, so bondage might be like using a necktie to like bind wrists. It could be fuzzy handcuffs. It could be real handcuffs. It could be rope. I mean, there's so many kinds of bondage. Silk scarves, right? But again, the consent, the consent, the safety and agreements that you have. But yeah, I mean, tying up, tying down, right? That would be like a bondage piece, a restriction piece. You're restricting your partner from moving. They're consenting to being restricted from moving. There's a lot of different kinds of tools and instruments and props out there for bondage.
Yeah, 100%. And then last thing I'll even say though is some people like to have, I guess I'm assuming too, their genitals played with a little more rough too. Like just their actual, for sure there's like, with our supplier at Marriage Supply, I'm seeing lots of things that like, squeeze the balls or do something to the penis or even the vagina, like suction stuff that is like pulling and pushing and back and forth. I think all of that stuff is somewhat popular too, probably.
Oh, totally. Things like, right, the classic is like a nipple clamp, right? But there's a whole genre of nipple clamps, right? But absolutely, right? So looking at, that's like the pain continuum, right? So again, someone might find a nipple clamp very erotic and someone might be like, that really hurts. That's a hell no for me, right? So yeah, there's so many things to explore in the realm of rough play. And that's why I was so excited about this topic today, because it is not one size fit all. It is not one rough fits all. But if you're at all curious about it, I know it can be an incredible tool for couples to explore, and when done consciously, when done thoughtfully, when done well.
All right. Awesome. Well, this is so much information from me. Like I'm appreciative of this, Stormy. So thank you for opening this up.
Awesome. Me too.
But I do have a Stump Stormy for you question today. Mm-hmm. I found this is from dabble.com. And so they did a research test from 2017 and then compared it to 2022. And they had 30,000 respondents. And I was going to see what you thought. Out of BDSM equipment, out of those, how many owned, say they own some BDS equipment? How many couples do you think own BDSM equipment? Percentage-wise, out of 100%, I guess.
I'm going to say 20%.
Very close, 27%. And it showed that female ownership was 26 and male ownership was 28.
Amazing.
Yeah, so I thought that was really interesting. And this makes me just one more. I was very surprised at this one out of this study. So we need to do some more anal toy episodes, because anal toys was almost 50% for male and female.
Let's definitely do an episode on that. I think I told you I teach a lot of tantra, and in the tantra world, they say the asshole is the portal to God. So I don't know about that. But, I mean, maybe, but I just say it. There's a whole world of play, a whole world of toys, and a whole world of pleasure and sensation. And it doesn't have to be penetrative. So like you can actually massage, stimulate the male prostate externally, also not internally. So anyway, we should do a whole episode on that, but I think I think it's really cool that the anal toys has such a following. I think it's a really it can be a bridge for people to explore that when they haven't before.
Yeah, totally. You heard it here on Sex 101 Pod. We even help you find God in all the places you wouldn't expect.
Where that one just came from the dredges of my mind.
Yeah. All right. Let's get to some questions, some listener questions this week. All right, here comes the first one. And this comes from Start Me Up and I'll Never Stop. Start me up. Start me up, I'll never stop. My husband and I are new to sex toys. Where should we start? A normal vibrator or a toy that is for the G-spot, or something for both of us? What do you recommend for people when they're first starting out?
Yeah, amazing, right? And the world of sex toys can be like a little bit sort of like the world of kink. Can be like, it's so overwhelming, I'm just not going to start at all. So don't let that be you, right? You're listening to this podcast, you're interested. Amazing question. I'm going to say it again, communication. So talking to your partner about bringing in a toy is the first and the most important step. Okay. So and again, don't do it in the moment. Don't do it when you're like wanting to pull out your rabbit that you bought or something like that. Right. So having the conversation before, and research shows that couples have better sex if they talk about sex. So do that. And then, I think if you want to, it can be really fun for couples to pick out a toy together. It can be a fun date night, like either go to a shop or go to like Marriage Supply and do it and shop online together. That can be a little less intimidating than a brick and mortar shop for a lot of people. But how do you want to use the toy? So is it because like, what's your main desire? So like, for example, if your partner's orgasming and you're not, well, then you're going to use it to bridge and help you to orgasm. Maybe that's your desire. Or maybe it's to explore, we just said the anus, right? Or maybe it's for shared novelty and pleasure, right? So knowing what you are wanting from the toy is a really great place to start. Okay? And then the other thing we did a whole episode, you and I, Toby, on sex toys and myths, but like reassuring your partner that this isn't to replace them. It's not to replace them. It's not because they're not a great lover. It's because you're excited about adding this in, the novelty to your partnership. Is a really, really important piece as well. And then I think that like the next step is to pick a toy, but again, keep it simple. Like you don't want to get one that has like, all these moving parts and remotes, and when you haven't really had any experience with toys, like keep it simple. And I have found in my own just personal share that sometimes the simpler the better. Like it's really like there are a lot of bells and whistles on a lot of these toys out there. And I consider myself very well versed when it comes to toys. But they're, keeping it simple so that you don't feel overwhelmed or intimidated by the toy is also a good place to start.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why too, like one of the things some of our best selling products are our boxes, because we at Marriage Supply, we have an intro to toys box, and you can just try a few different things. Because the truth is, no matter what, I sell sex toys, but you're not going to like them all. In fact, maybe many of them you might not even like. It's just up to the person. You might love them all, but also you might not like that many. But there will be some that really hit the spot, if you will, and you're like, oh, that was great. And then that you can kind of build off that. But you should try a few just going, hey, I just want to try this. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And that's okay. You know what I mean? I think something could work, something couldn't work, or it maybe didn't work today, but maybe next time it does. You give it one more chance or something like that. So don't, yeah, like I think what you said, I know there's like sometimes there's like tech guys, they're like, man, this toy will go 1,000 RPM, or they want the like you said, I don't know why I went Southern, but look at that thing, man, that sucker's spinning and vibrating. I got a remote over here, and
right.
So yes. You don't want to go too crazy in the beginning for sure. So keep it light. All right, let's do the next one. This one's from Tears of Joy. Question mark, because the question is it normal to cry after sex? My wife often feels very emotional afterwards, and I'm not sure if I need to console her or be proud of myself. I'm joking, but I don't know how to take this. She says she's not sad, but more just reflective during those times.
Yeah, so the technical term for that is called postcoital dysphoria, so PCD, or postcoital tristesse, which means sad in French. But it's super, super common. And they say 32 to 46% of women have experienced postcoital dysphoria. But one of the things I want to say, so it's very common, and a lot of men have too. I didn't see the stat on that, but don't assume your partner is crying because she's sad. That may be the case, right? That's in the name, the dysphoria, but often they call it, like it can be happy tears. They call it climaxing, right? So it's like a release, like a release of happy tears, right? It also can be overwhelm. It could be anxiety. It could be trauma. It could be sadness. It could be relational things, but don't make any assumptions. I mean, we say that a lot in this podcast too. You make an assumption you are likely going to be wrong or totally going to be wrong, right?
Yeah.
So don't assume. So it sounds like this person's doing awesome about like what to do, but knowing that a partner can be crying for many reasons can be helpful. And then I would say, again, the key is communication. So you want to offer your partner support. You might ask things like, these are just some things that I wrote down, like, is something wrong? Are you feeling sad? Did I hurt you in any way? Right? Because maybe it's physical, maybe it was emotional, maybe it wasn't, maybe they're not hurt at all, right? What can I do to comfort you? What can I do for you right now in this moment? And that might be nothing. They might need to be like left alone, and that's okay too. So, what are you feeling in this moment? If they aren't sure, because sometimes, especially if it's overwhelmed, it can be like, I don't even know why the hell I'm crying, right? That's okay. They don't need to know. You can still be there and be of support to them. And then if it's, it's something that's happening frequently and you or your partner or both are concerned, you can talk about it later, like not in that moment, because in the moment of overwhelm or a flood of emotions, whether that's climaxing or sadness or whatever it might be, we also don't have the best clarity to understand what's going on. So in the moment, you don't need to understand at all, actually. They don't need to understand the person crying, and also you as a partner offering support do not need to understand. You just need to be there. And then you can talk about it later to be like, do you have any thoughts about what happens for you? And then also just normalizing. I mean, I said 32 to 46% of women, myself totally included, have cried after or during orgasm, and a lot of men as well. So just I think your desire to be there for your partner is awesome. And those are just some ways that you can do so.
Yeah, I think, and men are notorious for problem solving, and you can just be there and like you said, you don't have to have an answer. You can just be there for each other. Because just like you just were, you were having great sex, and then you can have great emotions with each other still as well. That's great. Okay. And then lastly, this comes from Strong Like Bull. My husband sometimes loses his erection during sex. I'm fine with giving him oral or a hand job when this happens, but sometimes he just feels a little defeated or embarrassed. He usually can get it back, but sometimes we just end up stopping. Can I tell him this is normal?
Yes, definitely normal. So they say, most studies will say 52% of men have experienced erectile dysfunction at some point in their life. It increases with age, but 26% of men under 40 report that they have. And also just if your husband is struggling, so yes, totally normal. Okay, to answer your first part of that question.
Yeah.
Second of all, men can struggle up to 20% of sexual encounters with with maintaining erection, and it's not like true erectile dysfunction. Okay. That's how common and normal it is. Okay. And then obviously if it continues and it becomes a problem for them or for you, or its frequency is more than that 20% of the time, definitely rule out medical reasons for erectile dysfunction. That's a physician. Talk to your physician about it. Don't be embarrassed. It is so common. There's so much that can be done. And there's so many things that can contribute to challenges with erections, whether we're talking about that 20% or true erectile dysfunction. And then, one other thing I love what the listener wrote in, that sometimes it stops. One thing is what I would say, don't stop. As much as you can, don't stop, because the man, let's say, may feel embarrassed. You may feel like he's not attracted to you. There's so much that can go into it. Can be so challenging for a relationship, but don't make any assumptions. Don't read into it. Don't stop. Penetrative sex is a very small part of sex, right? So, and actually the penis is most sensitive when it's 60% erect. Just a little fun fact. So not being fully erect can still be very pleasurable for him and for you. We've got fingers, lips, tongues, and hands, right?
That's right.
We've got toys we just talked about in an earlier question. So, keep it going, expand the foreplay. I think focusing on pleasure, switching gears, right? We just said hand, fingers, lips, tongues, all toys, all of those things. Reassuring your partner, right, that this is normal, that do your best to not personalize it, and share with them that you're not personalizing it. Even I have clients that even are able to laugh about it, which is always a great thing, right? Not laugh at, but laugh with. And then again, the communication piece, right? Having conversation about it, maybe not in that moment, but maybe later, to say like, hey, like that's totally normal, because performance and anxiety is a pleasure buster. So you don't want to get into a pattern where you guys are making assumptions about what's going on with his penis or with your experience of it. And so instead you're going to have the conversation about it. And that actually has been proven to help so much.
Yeah. That's great. And that, I mean, it happens to everybody. And I like what you said, that you don't have to you don't have to feel like, oh, I'm letting my partner down. You can just go, wait a minute, we can continue doing this and just see what happens and get turned on again. Cause I mean, I guess what's the old saying? Your brain is the biggest sex organ you got, or something, right? I mean, that is what it is.
Totally. I mean, they say that all the time, that our brain is our biggest sex organ. I also say, and our biggest barrier to great sex, right? Like if we're all up in our head, we don't tend to have the best sex, right? So, doing some breathing together, reassuring, playing in other ways, going back into foreplay. And actually, I think we should do a whole episode on foreplay, because I do not like the term foreplay, because that suggests that sex is the end all be all, penetrative sex, that it's the appetizer to sex. It's like, no. Foreplay is its own fabulous thing. So, and then again, when you take some of the pressure off of penetrative sex, research would suggest you're more likely to have penetrative sex. So,
right. Well, that's awesome, man. Keep sending in your listener questions. We really appreciate these. You can send them into Toby@marriagesupply.com or
Stormy@lovedeeplab.com.
That's right. And you know what, Stormy, I just really appreciate you showing me the ropes of BDSM. I just appreciate that.
That's like maybe the best compliment I've ever had. You're so welcome.
I'm new to BDSM. Can you show me the ropes?
Yeah, no pun intended. Look at you, at you and your kink puns.
I know. I got one more too. BDSM is not good for one night stand because there's strings attached. All right, I'm out of here. We'll see y'all next time.